Hi, my name is Justin. My project is on people who are deaf. In my video, I'll be talking about some facts and statistics regarding people who are deaf, some characteristics of the disability, the different levels of hearing loss. I'll be talking about what you can do as a person who is working with someone who is deaf, and some cool new technology that people have invented to try to help people that are deaf. And then I'll have 2 assignments for you to do.
So what is the proper definition of deafness? Remember, we want to use first-person language when referring to people who have disabilities, so the proper way to refer to them is to say person who is deaf. Incorrect ways to say it would be deaf person, or that they are hard of hearing, which isn't as acceptable as it used to be. The textbook definition is an inability to comprehend verbal language due to an inability to hear. IDEA says it's a hearing impairment that is so severe that the child is impaired in processing linguistic information through hearing with or without amplification. And an amplification would be like their hearing aid. Alright, so there are lots of facts and statistics, as you can read some on your screen. The big one for me is 15% of children between the ages of 6 and 19 have a measurable hearing loss in at least 1 year. So that means we will definitely be dealing with it throughout our careers. Speech reading is the more current word for lip reading. Another one on your screen, a mild hearing loss can cause a child to miss as much as 50% of classroom discussion, so we have to make sure we make accommodations for them to learn. Listening to an MP3 player at high volumes over time can cause permanent damage to hearing. With early identification and appropriate services, deaf children can develop communication skills at the same rate as their hearing peers, so we definitely have to learn more about deafness as teachers. Approximately 3 million children in the U.S. have a hearing loss. 1.3 million of them are under the age of 3, so obviously it's a very widespread disability. As students who are deaf aren't necessarily visual learners, we have to make sure that we can quickly find out what type of learner they are in order to help them learn as best as they can. Alright, so now that we've seen some facts and statistics, let's look at some different characteristics that a person who is deaf has. Difficulty with oral expression. Will often have a degree of language delay, will usually exhibit some form of articulation difficulty, can become easily frustrated if their needs are not met, which may lead to some behavioral difficulties, which as teachers we need to know about beforehand. And sometimes use of hearing aids leads to embarrassment and fear of rejection from peers, so we have to be aware of that as well. Some more on your screen, difficulty following verbal directions, kind of hard for them. Often follows and rarely leads. It's kind of hard to be a leader if your peers don't know sign language. Alright, so here's your first assignment. Go to the website provided on the slide. If you don't want to type in the whole thing, Google what hearing loss sounds like. And there are a few different ones, so make sure you're on the same website as the one on the slide. So what you're going to do is you're going to follow the directions to turn the volume to the correct level. Click on each of the 4 different levels of hearing. You got normal, first indications of hearing loss, mild, and moderate hearing loss. And then what I want you to do in the discussion post is to rate 1 to 10 how easy it was for you to hear each of the 4. And then say which level you were first unable to make out what the person was saying. Alright, so some special considerations. Since we're going to be eventually working with people or children who are deaf, if we're teachers, we need to know how to treat each of the different levels of deafness, because it's not like you're deaf or you're not deaf. There are different levels. So the first one is mild. A student with a mild loss would hear speech, but at a reduced level. So hearing aids aren't as helpful. Background noise could also be amplified, so you got to be aware of that. Moderate or partial hearing loss. A student with a considerable degree of useful hearing, so they can still hear. When aided, it may be apparent that a student has a hearing loss. Profound. A student has very little residual hearing or speech, would usually use the sign language to facilitate communication. Severe is a little bit better than profound, but not by much. It just has a little bit more residual hearing. So you can see all of the people who are deaf aren't at the same level. Some have much more difficulty than others, so you have to deal with them a little bit differently. What can you do to help a person who is deaf when you are working with them? Remember that devices do not return the child's hearing to normal. A noisy environment will cause grief to the child with a hearing device, and noise around the child should be kept to a minimum. Check the device often to ensure it's working. Shut classroom doors and windows to help eliminate noise. You want to establish predictable routines for them. You want to, as a teacher, want to keep a close proximity to the student because that'll help them out a little bit. Provide small group work when possible. It's easier for them to work on with like one-on-one or one-on-two or whatever it is. Make assignment accommodations to enable a clear picture of demonstrated academic growth. So assessments are huge with children who are deaf, so they can make the proper progress. You can increase early reading skills in children by using a shared book reading, kind of like the small group work. If the student who is deaf is reading along with classmates, with you facilitating, of course, they can more easily learn to read and progress through the levels faster than normal. And if you're a teacher who is working with a person who is deaf, you should develop an understanding of deaf students. I mean, it's very important that we understand students who are deaf so that we can make sure they're able to get correct teaching. Because if they're able to get correct teaching, they can progress through the grades as fast as, the kids who can hear can. And that's very important. There's some pretty cool technology that helps people who are deaf. It helps them function more easily in everyday life. Some of the ones I have on here, the first one, Motion Savvy U&I. It translates sign language into speech and speech into text. So it takes a little camera and it tracks the location of both hands and all 10 fingers. And then there are some graphics, that represent live feedback and make the gestures that are being captured correctly. So that's a really cool invention that can help out people who are deaf. Then we've got Solar Ear. It's a solar-powered hearing aid. It costs a fraction of what other batteries cost, and it lasts for 2 to 3 years when regular hearing aid batteries can sometimes only last a week, so that can get expensive for people who can't afford it. I See What You Say captures spoken language on a smartphone, converts it into text, and sends text via Bluetooth to a remote user's device, so that's basically like motion savvy as well. Haley's Cherished Charms. So I'm going to read a little excerpt. At the age of 10, a girl named Haley noticed that many of her classmates at a school for the deaf and hard of hearing hid their hearing aids behind their hair. Haley said, "I wanted to make sure that my hearing aids shine and were fancy and I could be proud of my hearing aids." So she kind of started to design the jewelry, and she describes it as hearing aid bling, as only a 10-year-old would. Haley Cherished Charms are available in different colors, including some cochlear implants, so it's not just for hearing aids. Alright, and your final assignment. Go to the following website. It's a little quiz. It's 10 questions. It's multiple choice. When you're finished, I want you to record your final score in the discussion post. So if you got 10 out of 10, say you got 10 out of 10 or 8 out of 10 or whatever you got. If you want to just Google Deaf Quiz and then find that website, it'd probably be easier than typing all that out. So yeah, you could definitely go ahead and do that instead of just trying to type it out, and that'll help you out. So all in all, I hope you guys learned as much from my video as I did from doing research for it, because I really did learn a lot about deaf students making this video. So I was happy that I got this assignment. I hope you can all use this information in our future careers.